Well, hello, brothers and sisters. In James chapter 1:18 we read, "The one guided by his determination gestated us by the word of truth, into the end that we are any a from origin of his creatures." And these creatures are referring to those not out of blood, but also not out of the will of the flesh, but not out of the will of man, but out of God. John 1:13, which accords with the statement that flesh and blood does not allot the regency. And as I previously discussed in my video, 3 Resurrection Orders, not all will allot the regency simultaneously, but according to the first 3 watch times, where the first to allot the regency among the from origin of Christ accords with the first order of the resurrection and the eventide watch time, which is a unique resurrection for those who are deemed accordingly worthy. And if you and I are not deemed accordingly worthy of such a resurrection, but at the same time fail to understand its relationship to the orders of the resurrection classes, we are ripe for deception and our house may very well be dug through. So let's consider the first order of the resurrection for those who are deemed accordingly worthy, which is outlined here in Luke chapter 20, verses 35 and 36. Who are the same who hear on the voice of the Son of God in John 5:25, in contrast to others who will hear on the voice of the Son of the Human, which I talked about in my previous video, what kind of watch time. And those who hear on the voice of the Son of God will be manifested sons of God, sons of the resurrection, equal to angels, which that eon points to Hebrews chapter 1 verse 8, where when we back up to verse 6, we read, "But when as it were he, the Father, again leads the aforeborn," which aforeborn here is in the singular, pointing to Jesus, "into the dwellage, he says, also let all the angels of God prayingly crawl to him, and that abides to the angels, he says, who is making the spirits to his angels, and the flames of fire to his officiators." Where again in verse 14 it reads, "Is it not that they," these officiating angels, are officiating spirits being dispatched into the service because of those who are about to law accordingly allot safeguarding. So all of these angels are according to the eventide resurrection order, which those about to be are obviously subsequent, where these resurrection orders are outlined here in John chapter 5 verses 24 through 29. Where simply stated, those who hear on the voice of the Son of God will be sons of God equal to angels, but others who will hear on the voice of the Son of the Human will be human, hence revealed in flesh, 1 Timothy 3:16, in contrast to others who will be revealed in glory, Colossians chapter 3 verse 4. Which verses here in John 5:24 through 29 are very important to study and ponder. And the resurrection here in Luke 20:36 is the same resurrection that Paul was pursuing, where he writes, "If somehow I may get into the out resurrection, yea, that out of died ones," where the out resurrection here is from the unique one-time occurring Greek word ex anastasis, followed by out of died ones, ek nekros, which of course points to Luke 20:35, a resurrection in the likeness of the Lord's resurrection out of died ones. A resurrection of precedence for those who first enter the wedding feasts of the regency of God at eventide, where again verse 36 points to the context of John chapter 5 verses 24 through 26. For those who hear on the voice of the Son of God, who will be revealed in glory as sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. The same officiating spirits seen in flames of fire. And this term flames of fire simply refers to the illuminated glory, the glorified body. And when Paul made the statement, "If somehow I may get into the out resurrection," he was not saying, "If somehow I may get into the resurrection of the last day," which Martha here in John 11:24 perceived. However, what Martha did not perceive was the out resurrection out of died ones, the resurrection of precedence. Just as the men on the Mount of Transfiguration did not, as ones disputing what is the rising out of died ones. Just after they perceived the Lord and his raimenture becoming out-flashing white, which is from the Greek word exestrapto, which means literally lightning out, where like ex anastasis contains the preposition ek, which means out, so does this one-time occurring word, out-flashing white. where on the other hand, Moses and Elijah also were seen in glory. And perceived 2 men spoke with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who as having been made eyeable in glory, told him of his outway, which he was about to complete in Jerusalem, where the word outway here is from the Greek exodus. And when Jesus took the men to the Mount of Transfiguration, what he was showing them was a picture of his parousia. But what I believe he was also showing them was the 2 orders of the resurrection according to his own outflashing, the out-resurrection, and the subsequent resurrection among the holy ones with Moses and Elijah who were in glory, termed 2 men. So what I believe is that the statement of Paul, if somehow I may get into the out-resurrection, the ability of the Lord's resurrection is the lightning out or the outflashing white, which Jesus was showing the men and they did not understand what is the rising out of the died ones. Which I might also add is the context of the term holy angels as read in Jude chapter 1 verse 14. And the if somehow statement of Paul is a statement of humility, not that he already had attained to it. However, his expectation was to be found among the holy ones, according to this resurrection, as is mine, but not that I have taken it, but I pursue it, if somehow I may get into the out-resurrection, yea, that out of died ones. Now let's talk about Moses and Elijah. Who do these represent? Well, I believe they represent the unglorified holy ones according to the second watch time, where Peter, James, and John, the marveling, faithing ones. Consider 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 7 through 10, where in verses 7 and 8 we see the angels of his ability in a flame of fire, the same officiating spirits in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14, for those about to law accordingly allot safeguarding, where in verse 10 it says, when as it were he comes to be glorified in his holy ones and to be marveled at in all the faithing ones in that day. Where in verse 9, the Aeonian extermination is not the midnight hole away loosening. This is previous. So the angels of his ability in a flame of fire are according to the resurrection of precedence, according to what Jesus showed the men in his own body, the outflashing, where the 2 men who spoke with him on the mount, being Moses and Elijah, the unglorified holy ones, which we'll see is a manifested glory, but it's not the same as the outflashing glory, where Peter, James, and John, of course, did not yet possess a glory, all types of others in that day. And when the Lord comes in the second watch time, he will awaken those out of the sleep of death, where some will hear the voice of the Son of God, but again, others the voice of the Son of the human, the revealed in flesh of 1 Timothy 3:16, but made eyeable to angels. And here in Luke's account, he only records how the men were burdened with sleep, which can both be a figure of speech for becoming complacent and also death. But then, as thoroughly watching ones, when they awakened, they perceived his glory and the 2 men, that is Moses and Elijah, those having taken stand together with him, where taking stand together with him is also another important aspect of Moses and Elijah, where take note that they were termed the 2 men, which we'll see again later. The word translated men here is not from the Greek anthropos, defining human, but it's aner, which can define a male or a husband in the masculine role, but it also is used in the sense of maturity for those accordingly accomplished in Christ, where Paul uses the adjective in 1 Corinthians 16:13, stating, watch, stand firm in the faithing, be manly, behold having, where of course he's not only addressing men and husbands, but all of the faithing ones. But the point is that Moses and Elijah were not being perceived as human beings, where the fact that this is a picture of the parousia is confirmed in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 16, where Peter himself was eyewitness, which now brings us to the account of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And after Jesus resurrected, we find various accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John when the 2 Marys and the others came to the sepulchre, where of course Jesus was not there because he had already risen out of the died ones. Again, according to what he showed the men in his outflashing, lightning out. Extrapo from the preposition ek or out and astrape, lightning. And where I could go into great detail and probably spend 30 minutes talking about these various accounts of them coming to the sepulchre, let me just give a synopsis, where we see profound parallels to the different watch times and different orders of the resurrection. So first off, notice the eventide in Matthew 28, which of course is the first watch time at the turn into evening at 6 p.m. into 9 p.m. Where here the two Marys are beholding the tomb and perceive there came to be a great quake, which this quake is a very important key word for our consideration. Concerning this angel of the Lord, one angel, which is seen descending out of heaven, and having come, he rolled away the stone, where also the having seat upon it is unique to this one account at eventide, which parallels Ephesians chapter 2 verse 6 and Colossians chapter 2 verse 12. Where yet another unique characteristic concerning this one angel was his perception as lightning and his slippable raiment as white as snow. So let's connect the dots. We have a resurrection the men were disputing about according to Jesus outflashing white, where this angel at eventide, 6 p.m., comes out of heaven, whose perception as lightning and his slippable raiment was white as snow, where eventide is explicitly named. Where all of this describing this angel is very deliberate, providing clues for our understanding and correctly cutting the word of truth, because these are pointing to the same officiating spirits, those in the flames of fire, according to the ex anastasis if somehow I might get into. Now also this quake is very relevant according to resurrection because this points us to Matthew chapter 27. And where the angel out of heaven in relationship to eventide involved a great quake, we also see a quake involving the 9th hour here, where in verse 45 we read, "But from the 6th hour darkness came upon the whole earth land till the 9th hour." So there was this darkness encompassing the first watch time. But from verse 46 now we're into the second watch time, but about the 9th hour, where Jesus dismisses the spirit, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two parts, from above to down, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were torn. Then we read, "in many bodies of the holy ones," where we see the context of bodies. Those having been made to slumber were awakened, and after his raising, having come out of the sepulchres into the holy city, they were personally revealed to many. So here is a picture of the second watch time resurrection among holy ones, also involving a quake. So what I believe we're seeing here is two orders of the resurrection, where the angel out of heaven represents those officiating spirits who will be involved in the coming into the dwellage to awaken the died ones, where the bodies of the holy ones represent the same and glorified holy ones, which we see here in 2 Thessalonians 1:10, again according to the second watch time order of the resurrection, where again the faithing ones are marveling at the holy ones. Where, as I stated in previous videos, the first order of the resurrection at eventide involves only those officiating spirits, where the second order of the resurrection involves the glorification of holy ones and the marveling of faithing ones. And again, this darkness at eventide, I believe, is parallel to the apostasy that Paul speaks about that comes before and then the unveiling of the man of lawlessness, where the event of the first resurrection, due to unknowing as seen with Martha and the three men, will cause many to question their faithing because they believe in a rapture doctrine. Now, according to the 9th hour in verse 46 here, consider what Jesus is stating compared to what Luke records, where Luke accounts for Jesus saying, "Father, into your hands I beside set my spirit," where the word beside set is from the Greek paratithemi. And where this is the 9th hour of the second watch time, this accords with the second order of the resurrection and the parousia. Paratithemi, parousia. So where those according to the first watch time are officiating spirits, those according to the second watch time, he beside set his spirit. All things to consider according to correctly cutting the word of truth. And here in Matthew 27:46, the statement, "Why did you leave down me?" is from the Greek verb en katelepo, often understood or translated as forsaken. So where Luke shows the favorable of the beside setting of his spirit, Matthew and Mark the unfavorable. And the statement in Matthew and Mark, in its deepest context, is not that the Father has forsaken anybody, but in left down concerning the apostate, the unfaithing and incompliant. And the reason Jesus uses the first person singular pronoun me, that is according to the in leaving down, has to be understood in the context of Matthew chapter 25 verses 35 and 36, in his address to the sheep at his right, who are the very context of those who will be wholly loosened away into the third watch time, the midnight jail. And all who enter the regency, even among these least brothers, they are the Lord's possessions, and they belong to that great house, not as implements of value, but of implements of disvalue. Which now brings us back to the account of Mark in those coming to the sepulchre, where it states a young man is seen in a white robe, not as lightning with a slippable raiment as white as snow, but a white robe, where he's also perceived in the right hand parts of the sepulchre. Again, a picture of the sheep at his right that I just talked about in Matthew chapter 25, my least brothers. The last to enter the regency in accord with the third watch time, cock's voice, which of course begins fourth watch time into the morning. And because they are the last, they will have the least glory, hence white robe. Which now brings us to Luke and John's account, which are actually parallel to one another, where here again we see the term two men, which described Moses and Elijah, which angels are also described as being in flashing clothing, from the verb astrapto, where outflashing is from exastrapto, where of course the angel out of heaven, the one angel, was as lightning and as white as snow, who had seat upon the stone, where in John's account these same two angels were sitting down in white raiments, one towards the head and one towards the feet where the body of Jesus was laid, which are differences we should pay attention to because these are flashing but not outflashing, where they're also described as white but not white as snow. And here another important aspect is the reminding as to why they were seeking the living one among the died ones, when they were also made to fear at the appearance of these two men, where these two men had to remind them of things the Lord told them on multiple occasions, where here specifically his death, burial, and his rising on the third day. The bottom line is that if somebody has to be reminded of something, they're not going into something with confident understanding, knowledge, and expectation. And when the women went to report this to the 11 and all the rest, after being reminded, we read that the women's talks were made to appear in the eye of them as if talks to forget, demonstrating they either did not hear or did not retain what the Lord spoke to them in his word. Where prior to Peter's faithing, he had to perceive with his own eyes, running to the sepulchre, and then when he perceived, he marveled. And in John's account, there are more details to consider, because after Martha comes to Peter announcing this, Peter is seen running, but he is behind the other learning one not named. And when Peter looks into the sepulchre, what he perceives is that the two angels were not in the sepulchre as Mary beheld them, but what he perceived was that the head wrap, called the sweat garment, was not lying with the garment strips of the body, but it was disjoined from it, which I believe points to Ephesians chapter 1:10 in relationship to the upheading here, where some are allotted into the assignment of a headship and others are not, where the context of the upheading involves both those upon the heavens and those upon the earth, in him, in Christ, to do the upheading. And although this video was to primarily focus on the first resurrection, what we see in all of these accounts of them coming to the sepulchre are parallels to the various watch times and orders of the resurrection as to what they result in at the completion, according to the death, burial, and, of course, the resurrection of the Lord will accomplish into the all finished, when the completion of the all in all is completed, including those who will be wholly loosened away, which is the context of Hebrews 7:25, where he is able to save into the all finished those coming through him to God, always living to intercede for them as well. However, their glory will not be the same glory as those who precede them, but God gives it a body so as he wills, and to each of the seed its own body, 1 Corinthians 15:38. But what I wanted to establish in this video is that indeed, if we are to ponder the watch times, we have to perceive the resurrection of precedence in its context. Because if this hour arrives while you are still alive, but your expectation is in a rapture, you're going to think that you were left behind. And if you go to your grave expecting that you're going to stand at the pearly gates of heaven to walk on streets of gold, not understanding anything that I've said in this video, when all are awakened according to their subsequent resurrection orders, you're going to find that your hope was imagined. It was vain, which is going to result in some kind of shame for not correctly cutting the word of truth, which all of these things in the Word of God provide us clues for perceiving, that we may ponder them, that the Lord may reveal to us according to the expectation of our own calling and outchoice. So let's be diligent to give ourselves a standby approved to God as unashamed workers correctly cutting the word of truth.